everyone, this is Ali John Chaudhary, psychotherapist, and today I'm here with Fern Schumer Chapman, author. And today we have an exciting episode because we're going to be talking about betrayal blindness and sibling estrangement. Now, this is an interesting topic because this has been coming up more and more within our community, and I think that there's very much room for us to discuss this because a lot of times, a lot of us go through this without even knowing what it's called. And really, what we want to do is we want to get into it a little bit more today to be able to define that, describe what it looks like in some ways, and even give you some action steps that you can use to work through this, especially. So, Fern, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Oh, always a pleasure. Betrayal blindness. Well, many people don't see what's right in front of them, and it can be plain and obvious to everyone else, but they simply manage to keep the blinders on. So many people have approached me and said things like, I never saw them behave this way before. How could I have been so stupid? I knew I didn't like certain things, but I thought that's the way she is, and I won't pay any attention to it. I guess I was kicking the can down the road and pretending things were okay, hoping I would eventually get the relationship I wanted. Yeah, the big word there is hoping.
Yeah,
And so betrayal blindness plays into that hope.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that there's this sense of false hope that people give themselves, and they really don't want to stir the waters that much because they fear losing a lot, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm just thinking here of my grandmother that basically missed out on an opportunity to speak with another family member of mine to be able to avoid creating division, and I think she had a certain fear in doing so because I think she had a fear of losing perhaps some privileges and benefits, if you will. And she didn't want to have to experience that. So basically, by not speaking up, she was closing her eyes to situations that were, of course, detrimental to the overall unity of the family.
Right, they're trying to protect themselves from information that would create chaos or confusion or fear or suffering. And the problem with it is number one, you are fairly inauthentic as far as how you present yourself. And then the second part of the problem is you edge towards enabling and you allow behaviors that are intolerant to you and even
Exactly.
encourage them.
Exactly, right? And that's the problem, isn't it? Because this we have this need for attachment, right? And we have this of course this need for social agreements to get our needs met, right? And these are natural responses within us, right? I think that that's the thing that happens with us. We all have this need to bond with people, but there's a sense of betrayal that can sometimes happen. And when I think this happens with people that you're supposed to trust, then sometimes some of us don't know what to do with that, right?
Right, and the attachment actually trumps the betrayal detection. So in other words, your attachment to that person allows you to place blinders on and look away.
Exactly. So it's not really just denial, right? It's really about some sort of survival mechanism that people go through, right? And people will choose to ignore these types of situations. They'll shield themselves from information that causes chaos, fear, and suffering. And this is a strategy that enables people to essentially maintain connections that are significant to them and offers at once also a sense of physical and psychological security as well.
Well, you were saying it's a survival mechanism. It's really part of the freeze response, and the person actually goes numb and learns to ignore their inner warning system
Yeah.
that's trying to alert them to all of these issues.
Yeah, and it takes time for people to learn this, right? To shut themselves down and go into this freeze mode because some people really become experts at doing that, and I think that there's this ability to not want to see certain dysfunctional behaviors really stems from what you're saying there, that freeze response that some people can have.
And I think it's actually more common in women than men, which is interesting. And they actually don't always completely shut down what they see. What they do is they sort of rotate through seeing and not seeing, and they don't allow themselves to believe what they're seeing.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised that it's more women that go through this because I think women, generally speaking, don't want to disappoint, right? There's that idea of not wanting to do that, whereas men, for men, it doesn't matter whether somebody likes them or not as much, you know? I think that generally speaking, there are some differences like that when it comes to gender and such. Uh, but I think that at the same time, even with people that put on these types of blinders, they can sometimes even be aware that there's a betrayal, but they'll basically think and act and feel as though they don't know what the betrayer is doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but is it that they don't know or they don't want to know?
Aha, well that's the thing, right? We can delude ourselves a lot when it comes to certain things, right? We can choose to believe certain things or not believe certain things, right?
Right. And what they're doing is filtering information to fit their own pleasant narrative.
Exactly. So I think that there's some of that that happens, you know, and I think that that's just something to keep in mind. And I think with siblings in particular, it can make us endure contradictions, right? The fear of losing a relationship, being alienated, or even, you know, ignoring certain behaviors for the sake of an ideal that we create in our own mind, right? The ideal of the perfect sibling relationship, right?
Right. Right.
So I think that that's just something that we need to kind of keep in mind, of course, when it comes to that. You know, that this is certainly something that can happen in various contexts, but also with sibling estrangement in particular. You know, and we hear this often, this sense of disillusionment that people have. I can't believe I stayed in this for so long, right? We hear these types of comments in the Facebook group, right, about people enduring over time until they open their eyes.
Right. I think too that many people are looking out into the world and seeing a certain idealized sibling relationship, sisters or brothers, and they so badly want it that they look away.
Yeah.
And they, we've talked a lot about this, about expectations and fantasy that's tied in with sibling estrangement. And this is a big part of that.
It is, and I think that that's really important, and it can really be devastating. I think for people, you know, that continue to put on blinders because I figure that what happens in cases like that is that once people become lucid enough, the fall can be pretty hard. You know, so what we want to do is we really want to help some people here in our community by essentially seeing what they can do to strengthen and empower themselves as they go through this process of awakening. So, what would you suggest, Pern, in some ways? Like, what is it that you think would be helpful for some of our members in our community?
Well, first of all, I want to reiterate what you said, that the fall is really rough, and then people end up in a state of shock and fear and anger and pain. But I think you have to heal betrayal blindness in probably with a therapist in a safe, supportive relationship. You need a willingness to stand up to the injustice and the betrayal,
Mm-hmm.
and a willingness to claim your own truth. And all of this plays into what is authenticity. How are you being your true self? A willingness to risk relationships that may appear superficially adequate, but are actually toxic.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that it can really be important to be authentic with who we are. And sometimes, you know, to break that cycle, of course, it can be necessary for us to break free of certain toxic enabling behaviors and go into a place that is uncomfortable for us. So, you know, some of the questions that I would typically ask is, what is it about my family situation that I don't like, right? We really want to elicit a type of reflection on this where we're looking at the problem and such, you know, highlighting that and such. Are there certain things that were said to me that I didn't think were okay? Right? So we acknowledge our feelings in this whole process instead of numbing ourselves, right? So
Right.
if I speak up, what do I stand to lose?
Yeah.
What do I stand to gain? Also, so really looking at the yays and the nays when it comes to that. And do I feel I can approach others to gain validation of my perceptions? That's super important, right? Acknowledgement.
What would I have to feel if I were to face the reality of this? What would change for me?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. So to allow those feelings to come in, right? To acknowledge those feelings, right? It's very, very important. You know, even the things we didn't have is really, really key. You know, some people ask me, well, should I be grieving something I've never had? I don't know what it is, so I shouldn't be grieving it. And my answer to that is yes. you should be grieving something you've never had before because you already perceive it as being something that you haven't had in your life. You already perceive a lack. So yes, it's very important, of course, to go into a place like that to acknowledge that.
Right, you're actually grieving the void.
Exactly. So it's very important to do that. And I think that all these types of questions that we're bringing up in some ways to reflect and such really help to broach the subject, right? And, we can be our own best friend or our own worst enemy if we're not careful, right? And I think that something that's tolerated doesn't mean that it's what's best for us, and that we can contribute to an enabling situation if we're not careful. And it's much better to see what our actions or lack of actions can create. So it really starts with us when it comes to, of course, opening the blinders, right?
I think viewers might consider writing down the 5 things they're avoiding in order to get in touch with their betrayal blindness.
Mm,
What am I looking away from
I like that.
in a
I like
sibling
that.
relationship?
I think that's great, actually. So I think that this is a really good subject for today, and I think we've given our viewers a lot of different hints and clues as to what they can do in terms of prompts to work on that reflection for themselves, And of course, people are free to discuss this more at length in the Facebook group, Sibling Estrangement Sharing, Coping, Connecting. Of course, it's a thriving community and it's a safe place that, of course, I host as a psychotherapist, of course, to make sure that it stays a safe place for all. And I think that that's really important that people can, of course, work on this particular aspect because a lot of us go through this whole sense of betrayal when it comes to how we thought our siblings would be versus what the reality is all of a sudden when our eyes open up, you know?
Yeah, but betrayal blindness may stabilize an unreliable relationship for a time, but that stability really comes at a high price because typically you're forfeiting your own authenticity.
Exactly. So it's really important for our viewers to know that people stay real with themselves, that we of course cultivate that sense of authenticity. So important for ourselves and for our well-being. So Fern, we're almost out of time. We're going to need to just discuss about resources, of course. What would be your number one resource for our viewers when it comes to sibling estrangement at this time?
Well, I always come back to writing as therapy. And the reason I do is I think that more than anything else can provide some revelations and understanding of what you're going through. And so I would say the Sibling Estrangement Journal is an opportunity to explore some of your betrayal blindness as well as your difficult relationship with your sibling and your grief.
Absolutely. And that's a great resource, of course, to, of course, work on sibling estrangement. My resource right now, number one, is I would say the sibling estrangement support groups, of course, very important for people to recognize that is a place you can go where you can feel a sense of support, being heard, breaking isolation, of course, getting into a space where people can talk and feel understood by people of like mind going through the same thing. So that is my number one resource at this time. Of course, I am, of course, hosting the sibling estrangement intensive workshop on improving self-esteem. That is also something that people can contact me with if they need to go further with me. So that's certainly something that people can deepen in this process for self-improvement for this year, of course. So
And low self-esteem is a big piece of betrayal blindness.
I absolutely agree. So important to work on that. So thank you so much, Fern, for doing this. This has been a wonderful episode. I'm really glad that we were able to connect together and deepen this particular subject that is so prevalent in our community, of course, when it comes to sibling estrangement and, of course, the different responses we can have.
Yeah.
So I very much look forward to seeing you again and talking more at length next time on our next subject with regards to sibling estrangement. So thank you so much for doing this again, Fern.
Well, it's always great to be with you and take the blinders off.
I like that. Thank you so much. You take care. Bye bye.